I compliment the governor for taking swift action at the time of the Bruen decision in taking what was a law for 55 years in the state of New Jersey and declaring it unconstitutional. And you, Mr. Speaker, Assemblyman Danielson, and all the staff that's worked so hard to put together this piece of legislation in a way that will meet constitutional muster and meet its intended purposes. Because make no mistake about what's going to happen. Let's keep it real simple. Thousands of people in the country's most densely populated state walking around with concealed loaded weapons. What could go wrong? It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and it's a matter if we can have in our wisdom the ability to craft legislation and regulation to minimize what will no doubt be carnage. I'm glad Dr. Conaway cleared up the fact that someone's talking about home invasions. This has nothing to do with the precedent set by the Heller decision and making any changes. I heard one of our colleagues talk about the fact that someone might want to walk to shul and go into shul with a weapon based upon those very, very real threats. Well, truth be told, in order to meet constitutional muster, as opposed to the Supreme Court who said houses of worship might be a place that would be deemed sensitive, we kept that out so as to leave that decision to the elders of that church, mosque, synagogue, shul, or whatever. We talked about historical precedent. I don't want to get too deep into it. I promise not to quote Thomas Jefferson, but I do know, back when the Second Amendment was made a part of the Bill of Rights, that the only people that had handguns were real rich people, and that home invasions were hardly even thought of back then. And lastly, as it relates to getting your musket ready, if you thought someone was at the front door, you better pick up a 2x4 and hit them, because that happens a lot quicker. The biggest volume of regulation looking for historic precedent during the time from the 1780s up until the Civil War related to gun regulation. You want to find it even more? Go to the 1960s when Governor Ronald Reagan signed what was one of the strictest conceal and carry laws in the nation, in the state of California. So there's plenty of precedent. The issue is that, and the politics changed in the last 15 years. Now, Assemblyman Danielson went through the facts as it relates to what we know. There's a reason, and by the way, I want to all the constitutional scholars out there, the justices that have declared this unconstitutional, let me use the patron saint. Back in the Heller decision, Justice Scalia, Second Amendment rights, like all constitutional rights, are not without its limits. That's Justice Scalia. I'll tell you what Justice Thomas said as part of the Bruen decision. He said, disregard the benefits of gun safety regulations when it comes to considering the Second Amendment. Well, of course he did, because the empirical data in one study after the next in the last 5 years overwhelmingly tells us of the carnage to come. Joe, right? 29% increase in firearm violent crime, 32% increase in robberies involving firearms. Joe, you didn't mention this. 35% increase in theft of legal guns. That's what's going to happen. Look at Connecticut. Connecticut tightened up its laws, whereas Missouri made them less restrictive. 15% increase in violent crimes with weapons in Missouri, and just the opposite effect in Connecticut. This is what's going to happen, everybody, and it's up to us. Keeping the Second Amendment and respect for the law, even though I don't, and many of us don't agree with what the justices do, they're the justices and that's the law. And so working within that ambit is what this legislation is all about. We mentioned law enforcement. I'm not going to get into why they're for this, why they're against it. I can tell you this. You put a police officer, all of their training, all of their experience, in a situation where they have to make a split-second decision to use lethal force, and we know, unwittingly, sometimes they could not get it right. Now take a citizen who maybe have some training, and put them in that chaotic moment when they have to decide whether or not somebody had a perceived threat against them. They have to shoot accurately. Think about it. Think about that and what that's going to bring. I've heard a couple examples. I'll tell you of a 9-year-old young lady that was in her car with her 4 innocent family members, and when a victim of crime in Houston thought, hey, that's where the robber is, and started to shoot, she was killed. And of course, she was with a family that was totally innocent. That's what's going to happen to put what would be, just everyday disputes will turn into lethal confrontations. And that's why we have to do what we're doing here. The Rambo stuff makes me crazy. I can't believe you guys all buy into that myth. I guess that's because, who mentioned Tom Cruise before? They're not going to make a movie about Joe Danielson, who comes armed with statistics and works hard to make incremental change to make us more safe. Even Tom Cruise can't sell it, right? It's the Jason Bourne and Dirty Harry and Rambo. A good guy with a gun is going to defeat a bad guy with a gun. It's on the bill because here are the statistics. Here are the statistics from the FBI. When most every state in this country, even Texas, had very strict conceal and carry laws, from 1995 to 2005, the rate of individuals using a legal gun to thwart a criminal episode was less than 0.1%, 0.9. As we sit today, almost 70% of our country has very liberal conceal and carry laws, and now because of the Supreme Court decision, it will be even more. Guess what that statistic is, all you people that think a good guy with a gun is the only way to defeat a bad guy with a gun? This is per the FBI. 0.09, less than 0.1%. It's not going to matter an iota. Again, back to the constitutional, let me just use the words of the justices who passed this decision. Justice Thomas, in the majority decision, said, this is not a regulatory straitjacket. Chief Justice Roberts, Justice Kavanaugh, Justice Alito said, the Second Amendment allows a variety of gun regulations. All of what we're doing with background checks and training, even the $200, which is about 20% of what it's going to take to effectuate this law for real. We know in New York, recently a federal court or more than 10 years ago, a federal court said $340 was fine. That's 10 years ago. So again, for all of the constitutional scholars out there, I don't know what's going to happen. If this gets back to the United States Supreme Court, we know the logic they're using is really, quite frankly, a means to get to the ends. And perhaps you're right. But statistically, make no mistake about it, that this change in the law by the U.S. Supreme Court is going to lead to deaths. And it's up to us to do the best we can to keep that from occurring. 16,300 homicides, 19,000 plus suicides, 36 school shootings, and it's not yet Thanksgiving. Again, the U.S. Supreme Court, in their wisdom, has struck down our 55-year-old law here in New Jersey. So please, everyone, join us. In our collective wisdom, let's follow the New Jersey tradition of reasonable gun regulation that respects the Second Amendment and vote to support this bill.